Greetings everybody, I'm back again to speak with you about some more beautiful records. Today we're going to speak about a profound influence on modern jazz music, and that is the one Ahmad Jamal. Ahmad Jamal came up in the 1950s, classically trained, but the interesting thing about this musician is that he went his own way right out of the gate. As a fully formed, as a young musician, he finds himself with a trio with guitar and bass. Ray Crawford actually on this record with Israel Crosby on bass. But this is the best way I could describe this record is blues-informed, impressionistic, abstract, gently abstract, swinging modern jazz. And records like this, I believe, really helped form Miles Davis's conception, taking it to the next level. Miles was to say that two of his biggest influences were Freddie Webster and Ahmad Jamal. I can believe that because this record here is just a stripped down trio with relatively pithy piano, but very, very interesting. A fun record, a swinging record, but informationally, in terms of how the music is informed, it's quite a great listen. So Ahmad Jamal, this is probably from 1956 to one of the earlier records that Jamal made. Check it out, epic Ahmad Jamal. Here's one of my favorite reed men, someone off the radar, not well known by many jazz musicians unless you're a little bit of a deeper diver, and that is Sahib Shahab. Sahib Shahab trained in Boston, went to the Boston Conservatory. Interestingly enough, Elmer Snowden, who had actually sold his orchestra to Duke Ellington, giving the name of the band to Ellington, ended up eventually teaching and at a certain point was on the faculty at Boston Conservatory. So the interesting thing about Sahib Shahab is not only is he trained by someone who is a seminal larger band guy from the turn of the century, but he's also a modernist. And coming from the swing mainstream to modern axis, Shihab ends up rubbing elbows with Thelonious Monk and a lot of the important musicians that were changing the game in the mid-40s to the early 1950s. That said, Shihab was not tolerating what was happening in the United States in terms of racial relations, so ended up moving to Europe, where he had a wonderful life there. He had a very productive career. He made some wonderful records. If you guys are aficionados and looking for deep dive records, a number of the records that Sahib Shahab made in Europe are extremely rare, extremely valuable, and extremely important in terms of listening. That said, Pupi Campo, who is a restaurateur and semi-record producer who loved jazz musicians, he had a wonderful lounge where a lot was happening, and would actually entertain a lot of the visiting American musicians. Ended up producing this record, selling the licensing to Argo Records. This is a wonderful record. It is a snappy, happy, but deeply intense listening of an artist who would have had more due had he stayed stateside. He played on John Coltrane's first record. He rubbed elbows with a lot of the great musicians of the mid-50s. He would come back occasionally to do this. Someone you should keep an eye on, Sahib Shahab, Argo, 1963. Not an easy record to find. Summer Dawn is the name of this record, but there are 5 cuts on this record. They're all beautiful. In fact, let's see who's on this record. You have Kenny Clark on drums, you have bongo, you have Francie Boland on piano. That says a lot right there, because it fits into Sahib Shahab's vision of making small group records of flexible improvisation with more of an orchestral feeling to it. And that probably comes out from his original training with Snowden at the Boston Conservatory back in the day. Sahib Shahab. So here we have one of the great non-American jazz musicians emanating from Sweden, the one and only Lars Gullin. Lars Gullin, one of the great baritones, modern baritones, coming up in the 1940s, coming actually intermittently to the States to tour and to record. Gullin is, I believe, one of the top low-end reed men in the history of jazz. And you have Sahib Shahab, you have, there's a number of, Pepper Adams, there's a bunch of these guys, but Gullin actually is kind of a middle figure between Shahab and someone like Pepper Adams, because there's a European influence in the playing at points. He was also a piano player. Later in his life, he actually made records over in Europe that were larger, ensemble orientated with piano. But he's cutting it here on baritone with a small to mid-size ensemble of beautiful impressionistic chestnuts. Gullin, he did not live very long. He had somewhat of a rough life. I think there was a substance issue in his life at one point that actually kind of led to a hastened demise. Again, not well known stateside because he is from Europe, and he's someone that should be on the radar. This is a Black Label pressing from Atlantic from 1957, a record that you don't see very often, but keep your eyes open. Lars Gullin on Atlantic, a seminal baritone record. So folks, my last offering of the day is Harold Shorty Baker's record on King. This is the first time I've ever seen this record. I've just found it here at the Jazz Record Center. We've played a couple of cuts on this record, from this record, and Shorty Baker is one of the magisterial, majestic, and beautiful trumpet players to come up from the swing era. Shorty, only 5'5", ended up marrying the 5'10" Mary Lou Williams. Mary Lou was smitten with his trumpet tone. She even says that. She said, the first thing that drew me to Shorty was the way he played trumpet. And so this record here, I can't really talk a lot about this record because I've just heard it, but I want to share it with you because Shorty Rogers is one of these figures that most people don't know anything about. In talking with one of my friends here at the Jazz Record Center, I mentioned that this record should probably be reissued, and he said that no one would buy this record because no one knows Shorty Baker. Well, now I'm telling you guys about Shorty Baker. I'm sure some of you guys do know about him, but he was in the Duke Ellington Orchestra at different intervals. Some of his soloing on those records is just majestic, and particularly the way they produce those records with the miking, his trumpet tone just soars. This is a very atmospheric record from what I can gather. Basically a time capsule taking you back to a New York that we romanticize about. Kind of like watching an old film noir movie, but not just waxing poetic. The idea is the spirit of this person is in this record. Ed Thigpen's on this record, Jimmy Jones on piano on this record. A record that I'm sure, if you heard it, you'd love it. Probably will not find it. Kenny was saying that there's only one copy on Discogs, which is a stereo copy. But I want to share it with you today because we discovered it today. And just like you, I'm still discovering new records.